On February 28, 2026, an unprovoked preemptive war was launched against the nation of Iran by the US in coordination with Israel in what has been dubbed Operation Epic Fury.
US and Israel launched strikes on Iran. Explosions have been reported across the country, notably the capital, Tehran.
Explosions rocked multiple cities across Iran, including its capital, Tehran. Videos from Tehran show smoke. You see it here billowing over the city.
Breaking news.
Now at 6:30, the president addressing the nation after a coordinated attack on Iran.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests.
US-Israeli airstrikes targeted a meeting of Iran's Defense Council, resulting in the death of 40 high-ranking officials, with broader aerial bombardments resulting in the murder of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with some 700 people. In response, Iran launched strikes across parts of Western Asia, with reported impacts in Dubai, Doha, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, all countries hosting US military bases, leading to the death of some 6 Americans so far.
A missile fragment falling to the ground and exploding in Doha, the capital of Qatar. It's part of the retaliation from Iran after the U.S. and Israel launched a massive and ongoing military campaign across Iran.
And now we're getting reports of explosions in Gulf Arab countries hosting U.S. military bases. Live look now at Abu Dhabi, where explosions were reported, in addition to Bahrain and Qatar.
Additionally, direct strikes to Israel by Iran, in continuance with the June 2025 war, were conducted, all due to orders from Israel to attack Iran and kill all leaders as quickly as possible. American foreign policy is dictated by non-Americans, but the justification for the uncongressional act of preemptive war was not uniform. What was the reason for attacking Iran? Were they attacking Iran to liberate the Iranian protesters? Or to stop them from building a nuke for the sake of women's rights? Or to stop them from attacking US forces that were sent to surround them? None of the above. The US is picking off all of Israel's enemies one by one by one at US taxpayer expense. The goal is Greater Israel, a dream of Jewish supremacists and Zionist Christians. They want ethnic cleansing and to annex land not belonging to them, and are willing to spend trillions of other people's money to do so. Trump is going along with his scheme for his own nefarious reasons as he seeks to distract the public from the Epstein files. The same Epstein files where his name alone appears hundreds of thousands of times, literally, in regard to being around underage girls that were trafficked for the sole purpose of prostitution. That is the real reason he abducted Mandaro in January and threatened to invade Greenland, and now has invaded Iran, all to distract you from the Epstein files. Trump is desperate to keep the nation distracted from the fact that his Epstein regime is filled with literal pedophiles and child traffickers. The war in Iran will be a bloody one fought for Jewish interests and by evil on both sides. After the February 28th surgical attack on Tehran by Israel and the Epstein administration, an attack that resulted in the death of the Iranian leader plus some 40 leading military officials, an attack that started by the killing of children.
The U.S. and Israel launched the war against Iran on February 28th. Iran claimed hundreds of schoolgirls were the victims of a U.S. airstrike. Sources now tell CBS News a preliminary U.S. assessment found the United States is likely to blame.
But the U.S. is currently investigating an explosion at a school next to an Iranian Navy base that Iran says killed more than 150 people, mostly schoolgirls.
Questions over whether he's responsible for the killing of at least 165 schoolgirls on the first day of the war.
They've been bombing Tehran and other cities destroying homes, destroying hospitals, destroying schools, slaughtering children. In one instance, they murdered 165 girls, young girls, at an elementary school. They've been buried today.
An attack that was thought would lead to the utter collapse of the Iranian government, but has instead backfired immeasurably. Iran has since elected a new leader and delegated military roles per province instead of centralized control. Each province of Iran is able to defend itself independently without consultation from the capital. So the killing of generals based in Tehran is meaningless. Add to that Iran's thousands of drones plus hundreds of thousands of missiles and the mountainous terrain, all equaling to an unwinnable war without ground troops.
رژیم صهیونیستی ما رو تهدید هم میکنن، تهدید به حمله نظامی میکنن، اما به نظرم خودشون هم میدانند و اگر نمیدانند بدانند که اگر غلطی از اونها سر بزند جمهوری اسلامی تل آویو و حیفا رو با خاک یکسان خواهد کرد.
CCTV footage reportedly shows Iranian ballistic missiles raining down over Israeli cities with multiple explosions spreading across rooftops and streets. And this time, analysts say the missiles may be carrying cluster-type warheads designed to scatter dozens of mini-bombs across a wide area.
Working quite well, Iran is hammering the Israeli regime in retaliation for its atrocities and its unprovoked war.
The reason for the attack is not clear. Some have suggested it was to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon. But in February of this year, during negotiations, Iran declared publicly willingness to hand over nuclearly enriched material. But Israel attacked them anyway. They knew Iran had no nukes. The negotiations were a smokescreen as they prepared for a premeditated attack. The idea was to kill all senior Iranian leaders, which would create a void and vacuum in power that would be taken up by the Iranian protesters that would place a weak and subservient leader, one approved by Trump, in power that would bend the knee to Israel and Greater Israel aspirations. But instead, US bases across multiple countries have been bombed. US embassies have been vacated with massive losses to Israel both at land and sea, and the US is running out of ammunition in a war they cannot win. US and Israel were not prepared for a long war.
The military says Iran launched at least 500 ballistic missiles and 2,000 drones just in the first 4 days of the war. Of the Israeli-US war in Iran are estimated to have cost at least $3.7 billion. Is this a humbling moment, do you think, for the United States?
I think it is a very difficult moment because the Americans did not foresee such a war lasting so long, and the reaction of the Iranians and the allies, above all, as you rightly included Hezbollah, but also the Iraqis, you have today 3 fronts that are engaging. The Americans did not expect such a damage inflicted on all its military bases in the Middle East. The Iranian reaction also against the Strait of Hormuz was not foreseen at such a scale. And also Hezbollah firing 100 missiles in one day.
They thought the killing of the Ayatollah would bring the end of Iran. But instead, hundreds of Americans have been injured, with some killed.
I want to bring you some breaking news. 4 of the 6 crew members aboard a U.S. military aircraft that's crashed in western Iraq have been confirmed to have been killed. That's according to the U.S. military.
Overnight, rescue efforts underway after a refueling plane went down in Iraq. The KC-135 aircraft is part of military operations against Iran.
And billions of dollars turned to rubble. And so now they are using the Kurds as pawns and ground troops to try and topple the Iranian regime. They have their hopes on foreign mercenaries to tip the scales in their favor. But like before, it will end with egg on their face. Bombardments by Iran and Hezbollah are stand from a reactionary one to the aggressor. Iran will not surrender or call for a ceasefire as it did in June of 2025. This war will only end by Iran's conditions being met, or a compromise peace deal that is only due to the death of thousands on both sides.
Iran is not interested in negotiating with Trump or the US regime. Iran is going to punish the United States, and we are in the process of doing it. This regime in Washington has tried to cross a bridge that's a bridge too far, and they're messing with the wrong country. We're not Venezuela, we're not Iraq, we're not Libya, we're not Afghanistan, and we're not Syria.
The Zionists to blame. And they pushed the United States for the war. So the international community recognizes that Iran did not want war. We were doing trade. It was the United States and the Israeli regime that attacked us. So if the global economy goes down, no one can blame Iran. It is the United States and the Israeli regime.
Despite claims from the Epstein alliance that the war in Iran would take days to complete, as of March 19th, more than 3 weeks since the start of the conflict, the war rages on. A war that was started by a supposed president of peace.
I will prevent World War III as only I can. I will prevent World War III. We're not going to have World War III. I will prevent World War III. I will prevent, I promise, World War III. I promise I will be your peacemaker. I'm going to be a peacemaker, and I'll be your peacemaker. I will be your peacemaker. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. I'll get that thing settled before I take the office. I will have that war settled in one day. 24 hours. I'll have that war settled in 24 hours. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
And started for a supposed noble cause and not as a distraction.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective.
Yes, I believe that we will end up in a war with Iran, because I think Obama views that as politically good for him. But he's losing in swing states. I have said for a year and a half that in the end we'll end up with, somewhere before the election, we will end up in a form of war with Iran. And I think he's doing it for political reasons.
Isn't it true, sir, that a friend of yours sent you 3 12-year-old females for you to sexually abuse on one of your birthdays?
A war started on behalf of a supposed peace-loving nation and the sole democracy in the Middle East.
What's more important for Israel, Judaism or democracy?
Judaism. Democracy is a good value, and probably Judaism has a lot of elements of democracy in it, but Israel is not a democracy. Israel has some democratic values, but certainly not just Judaism as in Torah, but Jewish peoplehood trumps democracy. This is not a country that's meant to be equal for all. It's meant to be a nation state. It favors the national ethnic group called the Jewish people. It has to favor it. That's what a nation state does.
Israel is not a democracy, but they use America to install democracies around the globe. It's almost like democracy sucks and it doesn't work. It makes a country weak, and Israel knows that, so they want everybody else to be a democracy, and they themselves will have an ethno-state. I feel like that's kind of what Israel is doing. I don't know, am I crazy? Have you guys noticed this?
Did you ever wonder why the Jews are such great proponents of democracy? Whether in Indonesia or Pakistan or Serbia or you name it, whenever there is some threat to universal suffrage, the Jews are ready to send the U.S. armed forces in and bomb and kill until everyone is permitted to vote. Why is that? The appeal of mass democracy lies in the fact that in essentially every country in the world today, the number of persons unable to think for themselves is substantially higher than the number able to make independent decisions.
You know, anti-Semites like to say that Jews control the world. Well, let me tell you a little secret. In many ways they do, because our influence is beyond any type of rational understanding.
A war that has led to the extremist group Revolutionary Guard in Iran to garner more power, especially after the assassination of Ali Khamenei, seeing as there are credible reports that the new supreme leader is in hospital and not the one calling shots in terms of Iranian military directives, which could see Iran shifting from a theocracy to a military dictatorship, all thanks to Trump. A war that the Epstein coalition is losing, so much so that Trump threatened NATO allies so as to assist him with his war effort and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz.
NATO's making a very foolish mistake, and I've long said that, you know, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test.
NATO allies who he threatened to annex.
We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
And has placed heavy economic taxes on in the form of tariffs, but now begs those same nations to help him end the war that he started. A war he started on behalf of his master Israel that has turned his MAGA base against him.
I never thought that I would see a day where I would be rooting for a university above Donald J. Trump and his administration. But I don't recognize his administration right now. I don't recognize what's happening.
He's not America first, he's Israel first. Otherwise, why would we go to war with Iran? We're only going to Iran because the Israelis want it.
He promised us no new wars, and look what he did. Everyone needs to boo him. And everyone will, because he completely betrayed all of us. He doesn't care about this country. And maybe Elon was right in saying this guy's blackmailed by Epstein. Maybe he was on the Epstein Island.
And we all know this is happening because Trump has to kiss up to Israel because Israel has the Epstein files. Israel has footage of Trump and Epstein with underage girls.
A war that, according to Iran, has led to the deaths of 230 Israelis and 200 U.S. military personnel. Iran has attacked American assets in multiple Arab countries, resulting in the shutting down of the Dubai airport, the busiest airport on earth.
Authorities in Dubai say a drone incident near the international airport has damaged a fuel tank on site. The Dubai government media office says a fire broke out following the incident, but has since been brought under control by civil defense teams.
But Iran has faced backfalls, losing thousands of lives, including those of high-ranking security clearance. In response, recently, Iran fired on 100 targets in the city of Tel Aviv alone in the 61st wave of Operation True Promise, using multiple warhead missiles and cluster bombers.
Iran now confirming its national security chief has been killed in an Israeli airstrike. And a short time ago, the images coming in, flames rising from the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. What we've learned, Iran-backed groups hitting multiple targets.
This retaliation demonstrated the war was far from concluding, with reports from the States that in response to American actions on Iran or impending actions yet to come, the director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, has resigned.
We just learned, get this, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, has just announced he's resigning.
But we begin with the war in Iran. President Trump's top counterterrorism official resigning tonight, saying Iran posed, quote, no imminent threat to the U.S.
Could Israel be on the verge of nuking Iran due to heavy losses on their side and Iran's unwillingness to call for a ceasefire go back to the negotiating table? Are we on the verge of a ground invasion? Time will tell. The war will go on. A war started by Trump on behalf of Israel so as to distract the public from the Epstein scandal and Trump's impending third and final impeachment after the mid-term elections.
Is there a way to real victory by the United States? No, this is a disaster for the United States. It is a disaster for the whole world. The U.S. and Israel have thrown the entire world into turmoil, perhaps into World War III.
Operation Epstein Fury in the war in Iran is now entering its fourth week.
Good evening, Jerika. As we head into week 4 of this war,
with no foreseeable end. A war that was claimed would end in days.
Colonel, it did seem at the beginning that Donald Trump expected a quick win here. Coming off the high of what happened in Venezuela. Well, it's certainly not got that.
But is now 4 weeks in, resulting in fuel prices soaring worldwide.
Fuel prices are surging worldwide as crude oil climbs above critical levels amid escalating geopolitical tensions. Nearly 20% of global oil supply faces disruption risks through the Strait of Hormuz, triggering a broad-based energy shock.
That in itself will see to the price rise of all commodities due to the ripple effect when it comes to fuel price increment.
Well, the economic fallout from the US-Israel-Iran war continues. The president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., has declared a state of national energy emergency in response to the Middle East conflict and what he is calling an imminent danger that is posed to the country's energy supply.
98% of the Philippines' oil supplies comes through the Persian Gulf. And so the country has really been suffering from everything from transportation to the price of rice, which has more than doubled as well, because of course rice has to be transported from wherever it's imported from into the cities and out to the rural areas.
But there are those calling for the war to continue for their own selfish gain, and others who have profited from the war, namely the chairman of Palantir AI, who is the shadow president of the US and recouping his investment through regular old corruption.
Meet Shadow President Peter Thiel. Recognized as Republican kingmaker, Thiel has wielded extraordinary influence over Donald Trump's administration. Thiel dominated his original transition team, has won multiple military contracts under Trump for 30 different government agencies, and has been the primary force behind J.D. Vance's political rise to power. Thiel is also recognized as the Don of the PayPal mafia. He sits on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group and co-founded the now infamous big tech company Palantir, which he currently chairs.
Palantir announces a new mega program with the Trump government. And not just any program, but Palantir's specialty, a digital mass surveillance system to target you and your family and all the rest of us.
This is a war Trump wants an end to, as the war has led to Iran bombing US bases and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, where most of the world's petrol flows through.
الان دقیقاً تو قلب تنگه هرمز قرار داریم.
چی پشت سرمون؟
یه نفتکشیه که اینجا ایستاده و موتورش خاموش کرده تا تکلیفش برای عبور از تنگه مشخص بشه.
اون چیزی هم که ما اینجا دیدیم در همین محدوده تقریباً 40 تا از کشتی‌های تجاری هستن که باید ایران اجازه صادر کنه تا بتونن در واقع از تنگه هرمز عبور کنن. اینجا کجاست دوباره؟
قلب تنگه هرمز.
Which has led to Trump's approval ratings to plummet on the eve of the midterm elections, which could potentially see the Democrats winning both legislative chambers that could lead to Trump's impeachment. That was why Trump gave Iran his 48-hour deadline, an ultimatum to end all hostility and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, or Trump would obliterate all of Iran's energy infrastructure.
So tensions with Iran are escalating fast. President Trump now threatening to obliterate its power grid if Tehran does not reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
President Trump told the Iranians last night they have 48 hours to unblock the strait or he would obliterate their power plants. Iran replied that all energy facilities belonging to the United States will be targeted in response.
Donald Trump has given the Islamic Republic of Iran an ultimatum that if it doesn't fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz within the next 48 hours, he will totally destroy Iran's power plants. More than 30 hours have passed since this threat, and the brave people of Iran are still standing in the street chanting, "Not surrender to the United States."
An empty threat. If the US had that capacity, they would have done it already. This type of public ultimatum on social media is only done to make Trump seem like a tough guy, while in reality, no country would bow to such a demand, seeing as a genuine approach would be done discreetly with trusted third parties, not social media. Similarly to how Trump at the beginning of the war told the UK not to bother sending anything, but later asked the UK plus other NATO countries to help him defeat Iran, a war Trump fought on behalf of a genocidal nation that is the only country in the world to possess child prisons.
After interrogation, children are brought here for trial. Ophir military prison near Jerusalem. The army would not let Four Corners film inside. I've been behind these walls 3 times. I saw children shuffling across the courtyard, handcuffed and shackled. Some hearings lasted 60 seconds. I saw one boy shout the name of his prison so his mother would know where he was being held. I saw the judge convict some children without even once looking at them. Through it all, what I saw was a conveyor belt of convicted children.
And deliberately attack journalists.
Further rocket attacks were reported against Nahariya and admitted.
While starving medical doctors, a war started to distract his nation from the fact he's a child rapist.
To discuss this administration's massive cover-up of the Epstein files in order to conceal President Trump's involvement. This cover-up reached its apex last month when Attorney General Pam Bondi falsely testified under oath before the House Judiciary Committee. The Attorney General testified, quote, "There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that," unquote. This is a lie. There is credible evidence that Donald Trump committed a crime. And that, of course, excludes the nearly 3 million pages that the DOJ is refusing to turn over. Donald Trump is mentioned thousands of times in the Epstein files. There are multiple allegations that he sexually assaulted young girls.
The US recently sanctioned the war to continue, plus the placement of troops on the ground to the deployment of paratroopers in the Middle East to be later used against Iran. Iraq forces loyal to Iran in return have attacked US interests in Iraq, including direct attacks on US troops. Additionally, Iran has dealt a heavy blow in the form of raining ballistic and cluster-head missiles on the heart of Israel.
The devastation being wreaked on Israel, despite their blockade of any information getting out, is leaking out.
This was a direct hit. Not far from Israel's main nuclear reactor, showing Iran can keep raining missiles across Israel and the Middle East, all while maintaining their almost total blockade on the Strait of Hormuz.
Iranian ballistic missiles struck Israel overnight, inflicting damage on a scale not seen here since the beginning of the war. The southern city of Arad targeted, emergency workers arriving to a scene of devastation.
An angry Iran strikes the southeastern Israeli city of Dimona, home to a facility believed to house Israel's nuclear arsenal.
In retaliation for Israel's cupboard-bombing military Gaza-style tactic, as well as other advances that the US is not keen to admit to. That is why Trump and his master Israel have called on third world nations to assist them in a war they started. which only broadens the conflict with possible retaliatory strikes by Iran on those said nations, and also why Israel bombed Arab countries, then blamed it on Iran, so to drag those nations into the war.
See that in some of the war strategy, right? We actually know one of the attacks on Bahrain that was purported to have come from Iran, actually now we know it was a Tomahawk. That was a U.S. missile that actually, did the damage there in Bahrain. We've had other indications that the Americans and the Israelis are actually responsible for some of the attacks that they are blaming on Iran. Why? Because they want to draw the entire region in. They want to make it so that those Arab Gulf states, that they also fully join the fight without hesitation.
Sadly, as of now, this war has no end in sight.
Israel's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region. Iran's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region. Israel's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region.
We are now in the month of April and entering the 5th week since the February 28th attack of aggression against Iran.
30 days now into the Iran war, Sean.
The conflict between Iran and the U.S. and Israel now entering its 5th week.
The war in Iran now entering its 5th week.
With the Gulf region firmly within precarious times, an attack that was thought would cripple the Iranian military and decapitate its leadership has instead placed the U.S. in a precarious position due to more power being placed in the hands of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, who are effectively controlling the country at this time of war, making the critical decisions. A war led by a pathological liar. A war that was thought to end in days.
War will end in about 4 to 5 weeks. We are through that timeline, but the war is still going on. So he will have to, analyze as to why he said that in the first place.
He is now in his 5th week, resulting in billions of dollars wasted, raising the debt ceiling in the US, and worst of all, the death of thousands. If that wasn't bad enough, the Yemeni Iranian-backed resistance group, known as the Houthis, have now formally entered the war on behalf of Iran.
The Iranian-backed Houthi group announced it's launched 2 missile attacks towards Israel, marking it their official entry into the month-long war between Iran and the US and Israel. Up until now, the Houthis had largely stayed out of the war, which has shook the entire Middle East and has already caused serious global economic fallout. With the conflict escalating, the group has now threatened shipping routes in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea, a crucial passageway where 12% of world trade passes through.
Happy Saturday morning. The Houthis have joined the war. It's gotten more and more disastrous. Now the Houthis are going to help block the waterways and the price of oil is going to go up higher.
Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis launched missiles at Israel on Saturday, their first such attack since the start of the Iran war. The move heightens the risk that the conflict, now in its 5th week, could expand further across the region. Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Sarah said, quote, "The operation involved a salvo of ballistic missiles targeting sensitive military objectives in Israel." He added that the operation achieved its objective. Israel confirmed a missile had been fired from Yemen, but said there were no reports of casualties or damage.
A significant escalation in a region already on high alert.
The Yemeni armed forces, with the help and the grace of God Almighty, has done its first military attacks with a barrage of ballistic missiles against sensitive military targets in the south of occupied Palestine.
And with that attack, Yemen's Houthis entered the war, making this Israel's 3rd active front. The Israeli army says air defenses intercepted 1 missile before it reached Israeli territory.
Trump has responded by placing thousands of Marines and troops on the ground, threatening a ground invasion against Iran. But in reality, the troops Trump has placed is nothing more but a chess move. Trump ordered troops to be placed so as to get the upper hand in ceasefire negotiations with Iran. He had no actual plan to march them onto Iranian soil, as boots on the ground would equal coffins in the ground. Iran made strict demands, calling for the complete removal of all U.S. bases in the Gulf, for Iran's missile program to be left alone, for Israel to stop bombing Lebanon, for complete sanction relief and financial compensation from the U.S., all of which the U.S. rejected. And so Trump used ground troops to intimidate Iran into submission through a bluff charge and the idea of a ground invasion, a bluff that has gone unheeded. Iran has punished the U.S. and Israel heavily, targeting U.S. warships, critical infrastructure, air bases, and military outlets using new generation missiles. Israel and the U.S. have responded with carpet bombing tactics.
Ali Larijani was a civilian politician who had no connection to any terrorist organization, and assassinate him in the middle of Tehran was an absolute war crime with a violation of every international law, and no one in the Western countries has condemned this. Second thing, Israel is selling these attacks as form of artificial intelligence oriented smart wars. And let me tell you, the way they assassinated Larijani and the day after they assassinated Khatib, the intelligence minister in Iran, had nothing to do with the smart wars. In order to detect where he is, they come up with 6 or 7 different places and they bomb all of them in a blind way. So in the place that they finally found Ali Larijani, which was his daughter's house in a very kind of poor suburb of Tehran, they killed 105 people, and they killed equal amount of people in 5 other destinations. So 400, 200, 300 people getting killed to get one of Iranian politicians. Yeah? And that's what they call a smart wars.
Which is why the death toll in Iran is much higher than that in US and Israel, respectively. In addition to them bombing steel plants and ammunition depots in Iran, they too have attacked civilian districts and bombed universities so as to kill military commanders where they live and work, and also inflicting maximum fear into the hearts of ordinary Iranians. But Iran has responded with fresh waves of ballistic and cluster bombs on Israel, resulting in significant damage on Israel's part.
More importantly, Israel is being remorselessly bombarded 24/7. The head of the Air Force, the head of Mossad, the Mossad headquarters, the Tel Aviv police headquarters were all bombed and destroyed just this very day.
As well as targeting U.S. assets, Iran bombed Israeli nuclear plants and targeted U.S. troops that led to scores of them being injured, giving Iran an upper hand in the war, with numerous victories on the ground, thereby turning the tables on the Epstein coalition, which is why, out of desperation, Israel is using AI images in propaganda videos, and US call on Iran to cease production of drones and missiles as they are losing the war they started. Gas prices have soared.
The national average for a gallon of gas is higher than $4. This is the highest in nearly 4 years, higher than any point during the president's 2 terms.
Let's start by looking at oil prices. They're rising considerably this Monday, whether it's the European North Sea Brent crude benchmark, which is above the $115 a barrel mark, or the U.S. West Texas Intermediate benchmark, both higher. The Brent actually on track to see its biggest monthly gain on record before the U.S. and Israel launched its missile strikes against Iran on February 28th.
And call the internal conflict within the Trump administration, as the U.S. has taken and copied the playbook of Israel in fighting an enemy they created.
Well, here's what I say. Let's get the real history in. You know, I listen to people like Congressman Lawler in New York. They all love to go back to 1979, the day the Ayatollahs took over. They conveniently don't go back to when I was alive. I'm a little older than them. Let's go back to 1953, shall we? When Iran had a Democratic elected president, the United States didn't like him, we pulled a coup d'etat, and what did we do? We stuck the authoritarian dictator, the Shah, in power. That's when the I Hate America started, was way back in the 50s when we interfered in their democratic elections. But how convenient we are that we forget that. Then in 1979, what took place? The Ayatollahs took over, who were probably worse than the Shah. But let's remember, the hatred of America was started by America. It was not started by the Iranians. We interfered in their government way back in the 50s and overturned their democratic elected president, and then the dictatorship started with the Shah and now went to the Ayatollahs, and here we are today. But I'd like for Congressman Lawler to at least try to go back in history from before he was born to see what could have occurred and that the United States was the person that caused the hatred between the two countries.
There would be no Ayatollah or Islamic Republic without the US, just as there would be no Hamas without Israel.
You know, Hamas, if you look at the history, you'll find out that Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat. And you say, well, yeah, that was better then and it served its purpose, but we didn't want Hamas to do this. So then we as Americans say, well, we have such a good system, we're going to impose this on the world. We're going to invade Iraq and teach people how to be Democrats. We want free elections. So we encourage the Palestinians to have a free election. They do, and they elect Hamas. So we first, indirectly and directly through Israel, help establish Hamas. Then we have election. Then Hamas becomes dominant, so we have to kill them.
So are you saying Benjamin Netanyahu deliberately boosted Hamas to try to prevent a Palestinian state?
Yeah, sure. He deliberately and systematically even told, on record, whoever wants to avoid the threat of a two-state solution has to support my policy of paying protection money to the Hamas.
So what we did, with the permission of our Prime Minister, is to let Qatar to transfer a huge amount of money in cash, probably more than $1.4 billion. By doing it, we increased the power of Hamas. We did everything in order to make sure that Hamas will go on controlling Gaza, and Palestinian Authority will control the West Bank, so they will fight each other.
Netanyahu maintains the Qatar money was to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe. Having helped to build up Hamas, Netanyahu has now vowed to destroy it.
He fed the beast, and it exploded in our face. If you base your national security strategy solely on force, then you need to win 24/7 forever.
More wars are coming for us all in Trump's unwinnable war.
Okay, but do you think America was justified in joining Israel in the attack on Iran?
No.
Why
Absolutely not. Because we started the war. I'm not for starting any war. We fired the first shot. Plain and simple. You want to put it in Rambo terms? We drew first blood.
We sacrificed 168 beautiful, innocent school kids, the best kids. Tremendous sacrifice. Nobody does sacrifice like we do. We did it for you, sir. Believe me, Val, it's huge.
More. I want
On the embark of the 6th week of Operation Epstein Fury, a ceasefire agreement was reached between Iran and the Epstein coalition.
And good evening. We do begin with that breaking news, a last-minute deal tonight between the U.S. and Iran to stop the fighting, at least temporarily, after 38 days of joint U.S.-Israeli military operations against Iran, known as Operation Epic Fury. That agreement announced this evening by President Trump.
Just an hour and a half away from that deadline, President Trump seconds ago taking to Truth Social to say that he is talking to Pakistani officials, and based on that conversation, he will agree to stop bombing for 2 weeks. He also says that Iran has agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz.
The U.S., Israel, and Iran have agreed to a tentative 2-week ceasefire, but all sides have presented vastly different versions of the terms.
כפי שאתם יודעים, הלילה נכנסה לתוקפה הפסקת אש זמנית בת שבועיים בין ארצות הברית לבין איראן, בתיאום מלא עם ישראל. לא, הם לא הפתיעו אותנו ברגע האחרון. עכשיו אני מבקש להדגיש, זה איננו סיומה של המערכה.
A ceasefire that came at a time that Trump and Israel were losing the war. A war that started by an act of aggression that was thought to decapitate the regime, but instead resulted in a regional conflict that crippled global gas and petrol access. Iran responded to U.S. aggression through a crushing response by firing thousands of missiles and drones that resulted in numerous casualties and the destruction of billions worth in property. Despite Trump's address prior to the ceasefire, where he claimed Iran to be bombed back to the Stone Ages.
Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
Iran attacked U.S. military aircrafts, radar equipment, and naval assets, plus fired the largest missile attack on central Israel by overwhelming the country's defense systems and putting Israel under their heaviest attack since the war broke out, thereby placing U.S. and Israel in their darkest day yet, with Israel fighting a losing war on 3 fronts. That all culminated in the downing of a U.S. fighter jet within Iran using new air defense systems. U.S. aircrafts were destroyed by Iran, as was the occurrence in the last days before the ceasefire agreement, but the crew managed to escape. One crew member, in particular, was hunted by Iranians as he went missing within Iran. A reward was placed on his head for his capture. A hunt took place against him, with a rescue mission ordered by Trump so as to avoid embarrassment by his capture by Iran.
First off, was everyone on board with the operation, or were there people that were trying to talk you out of going through with the operation this weekend?
Not everybody was on board.
Somebody else within
No,
your...
there was military people, very professional, that preferred not doing it. These two were totally on board. So we had people that were within the military that said this is not a wise, and I understood that, but I decided to do it.
The U.S. then claimed the 2nd Airman was rescued and now safe and sound in a dramatic and heroic rescue, while Iran claimed it was a failure. U.S. aircrafts were destroyed in this rescue mission for the 2nd Airman, with the U.S. claiming they detonated them themselves, while Iran claimed they destroyed them. It was after this that Trump threatened an entire civilization in a bizarre and unpresidential social media post, openly calling for the destruction of an entire nation if his demands were not met, publicly threatening to open the gates of hell.
The President of the United States keeps laying down markers. You can't go past next Tuesday at 2 p.m. or whatever. You must open the strait or else you'll be living in hell, as if we're not there already.
A threat that was not met well by either American lawmakers or powers abroad.
To eliminate a, quote, whole civilization in Iran.
And joining us now to discuss what's going on, the former Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us. I know you recently called for the president to be removed from office under the 25th Amendment to the Constitution after that threat that he made about destroying the whole civilization of Iran. The president has a long history of shocking and unprecedented social media posts. Why was this the final straw for you?
Because it's absolute madness. How can any person that is mentally stable call for an entire civilization of people to be murdered, to be wiped out, to never come back again? That's what the president called for.
I'm sick of it. Can't he just behave like a normal human? I mean, honestly, like the president, 380, yes, shut up. You don't threaten to wipe out an entire civilization. We're talking about civilians just casually in a social media post. This is completely irresponsible and disgusting.
Iranians in response called his bluff, openly daring him to kill them all. This had come after US and Israel had deliberately targeted Iranian infrastructure, including petrochemical factories, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and even civilian bridges. They then took credit for it, promising further such attacks in future, which under international law is a war crime. After Trump's bluff was called and his deadline expired, while on the back foot of a crushing Iranian response, Trump still went in between his legs and he cowered out, just as he did with invading Greenland, or making Canada America's 51st state. It was then a ceasefire agreement was reached, giving Iran the victory over the world's largest nuclear power. Iran had won, defeating two nuclear-powered countries even after Trump's lies of total victory.
Iran has basically gotten everything it wants in the agreement because Trump was desperate to open the Strait of Hormuz. This is a huge black eye to the United States. I'm glad that Trump didn't engage in increased war crimes or, quote, destroy entire civilization. But this thing, 39 days in, is a total and complete disaster, and we have been right about it.
Despite the ceasefire, Israel attacked Iran shortly after, which then prompted Iran to bomb Israel back.
I'm going to go over to Tel Aviv to talk to Mike again. Mike, what are we seeing there?
Well, Jesse, as anticipated, the sirens are now wailing over Tel Aviv, indicating that another missile is inbound. And it looks like those bright lights in the sky are the missiles. And it looks like you can see an interceptor that is in hot pursuit of the missiles. Whoa.
It was also at that time Israel bombed and attacked Lebanon.
Iran's deputy foreign minister has hit out at Israel and the United States for what he is calling a grave violation of the ceasefire deal. Saeed Khatibzadeh told the BBC that Israel's continued attacks in Lebanon are a massacre and that a clear message had been sent to Washington that they were not compliant with the agreement.
Which led Iran to threaten to restart the war and close the strait once more, leading to further negotiations being needed. Once more, a war was started by Israel, the world's most hated country.
امروز دشمن ما اون دشمنی که در مقابل ما قرار داره یعنی رژیم صهیونی منفورترین رژیم دنیاست منفورترین حکومت دنیاست
with the US expected to settle the bill.
Hey, Orange Pig, America first? Oops. Oh boy, that was the slogan you sold. But Bibi's pulling strings and your vote is getting cold. We're not just fighting for Iran, hear this clear. Your people reached out to us. Yeah, we got the DMs here. If one nation's gonna stand against the Epstein regime's fear, it's us till the last breath. We've been doing it for years. We're standing here for everyone. Your system ever wrong, they've known all along. The enemy was always your government is run by pedophiles. They ordered you to die for Israel. They ordered you to die for Israel. They lied to you all.
you